Welcome to the Midlife Manifesto, where we are embracing the twists and turns and transformations of midlife. I am Arlene Scholten, your host and fellow traveler on this crazy journey. So if you're looking to reinvent yourself, rediscover your passions, or just make sense of this beautifully messy phase of your life, you're in the right place. I will be interviewing experts on a number of different topics, anything midlife, whether it be your health, wellness, perimenopause, relationships, rediscovering yourself, new adventures, career shifts, raising teenagers, you name it. We're going to discuss it all right here. So grab your favorite drink, settle in, and let's get real about midlife, because it's more than a phase. It's our time to thrive. We can do this together, so join me on my journey. It's crazy, but let's make it some fun. Hello, and welcome to the Midlife Manifesto, where we are redefining aging. And today, I am very excited to have Lucy Hurn on my podcast. So welcome, Lucy.
Hi there.
Hi. So I'm just going to tell you a little bit about Lucy. So Lucy is the UK's first mental health and exercise triathlon coach. She works with a wide range of female clients, from those doing their first triathlon through to Ironman and beyond, or simply wanting to just build their fitness or reduce their risk of injury. She supports them by making changes in their training and lifestyle programs so they have more energy, training feels more manageable, and adds value to life. And so they can also see very quick results. Her coaching combines over a decade of experience as a triathlon coach, the power of mindset coaching as a qualified mental health and exercise and life coach, and has a passion for working with women to strengthen their relationship with exercise and their body and build their confidence about what they can achieve. She works with her clients to ensure the training works for them, fits their life, and they get to the start line happy and healthy. This includes a focus on nutrition, strength and conditioning, sports psychology, and recovery, as well as the physical training. She has a passion about working with women as women working with their bodies and menstrual cycle, rather than just treating them as small men, and working towards a world where women get equal the number of men on the start line by working with women to overcome barriers and gain confidence. She has options for clients with a wide range of training goals and budgets, from a monthly membership, weekly online strength and conditioning training, through to fully personalized training plans accompanied by coaching. So you will see all of her details if you want to get in touch with Lucy in the show notes. So welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
Let us
Good to be
dive
here.
in. So I saw you on one of the business networks in York, and I read your little bio and I thought, oh my gosh, I need to get her on my podcast because I'm midlife and I love triathlon. So here we go. So can you tell me first a little bit about if you can share your journey into triathlon and what inspired you to become a coach, first of all?
So I was not the fit kid at school. Often when I hear sort of people doing these talks on podcasts or whatever, you hear somebody going, yeah, I was always into sport and la, 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 la. I was not the fit kid at school at all. I was generally active, but I certainly wasn't in any way the sporty kid. And then back in 2012, I had probably the worst year of my life ever. Just a load of things went wrong and my mental health was really poor. And I don't know, I really can't remember what kicked it off, but something in me said, okay, I'm going to try setting myself some challenges to try and, I guess, get myself out of this state and try and, just turn things around. And so I did this A to Z challenge. I didn't do all the letters of the alphabet at all, but I did my first triathlon. I did the London Marathon. I swam outdoors every month of the year. I did all these things, and I got very creative in terms of how I could make things stand, from the A to Z. And as I say, I didn't do all of the A to Z, but it was the first time I'd really pushed myself, done anything physical, and just it changed my life. So that was 2012. By 2013, I joined my local triathlon club and I'd started coaching with them because I was so excited about just the power of exercise to make you feel better. And then as I joined a triathlon club, also that community that comes with it and the support. I was very lucky to be part of an amazing club down in London. And yeah, just literally changed my life. And then a few years later, I got to the point of giving up my very good day job, and becoming, first of all, a personal trainer, but as a route to becoming a triathlon coach. I had no idea how you become a triathlon coach. So I was like, well, I better learn about fitness. I'll become a personal trainer. And then from that, started following through the triathlon coach pathway and got more and more into that. Eventually, back in, I'm useless on dates, but maybe 2016, 2017, going full-time freelance as a triathlon coach. And that's what I've done ever since. And that's what I'm still so passionate about. You have good days and bad days, but I absolutely love it. My own competing is important to me, but far, far more important is the people that I work with and their journeys, and taking them on that same journey that I went on. I'm thinking, there's no way I can do that. I could swim, as in I wasn't going to drown, but I couldn't swim in any way competitively. I got classes to learn how to do front crawl, and went from there, and now I compete at age group. I've done Ironman and stuff, and proved to myself that I can take on a challenge. I'm not the fastest, but I can complete that challenge. And that's what I love about it, working with, particularly with women who believe that they can't do this challenge. They've got this goal. You can see their eyes light up when they talk about it, but they think they can't do it. And then working with them, partly to build the physical fitness, but to work with them to build that self-belief and confidence as well, and show them that they can.
In 2012, do you mind if I ask how old you were then? Well, I'm giving your age
Oh,
away now, aren't I?
I can tell you, if you can do the maths of it, I'm useless. I have to ask. I'm with my partner's boyfriend this weekend, and I had to ask my sister how old he was, and she was like, "Well, he's the same age as you." I was like, "I know, I don't know how old I am." So I am now 47.
Okay.
You can do the maths of working
Okay,
that
okay.
out. Significantly younger than now.
How did you know? Did you know at 2012, you said you went through some rough times, a challenging
Mm.
time. How, or did you know that, throwing yourself into triathlon and your A to Z challenges, how did you know that did it help?
It did. It changed my
Mm,
life. And yeah, massively. I think, I'm a mental health and exercise coach. I'm
yeah.
incredibly passionate about the power of exercise for mental health. I don't know why I thought to do it. I don't know what kind of, I think it's, one of those things I'd heard of and kind
Mm,
of had an idea that I wanted to do, but I really can't remember what that kind of push was that said, give this a go. I think I just knew something needed to change. My life was a mess and I needed to change something. And this felt like something tangible I could do to try and sort of take myself out of living down in that pit of despair. And in terms of what the changes were, I mean, I think just the mental health of going for a run, or I was incredibly lucky to live where we had an open water Lido as well, so swimming outdoors,
yeah.
but just push it. And I think finding that confidence that I could set a challenge and I could do it. And like I say, I wasn't the sporty one, so this was a complete revelation to me,
Yeah.
that I could do something, and started to feel proud of myself. I'm a girl who went through the pressures that many women go through, or go through all our lives, but I had that I didn't feel kindly about my body at all. I had disordered eating and things, and to then start to treat my body as something I respected, and if I treated it
Yeah.
well, it would treat me well. Like, that changed my relationship with my body, my whole self. That
Yeah.
was a massive change. But I think it was also just, that the exercise is so good for our mental health. And then the community, triathlon is you do it by
Yeah.
yourself. People think it's an individual sport, but if you have the benefit or the ability to work with a club and get that support of people around you, again, that was life changing for me.
Yeah. How did you, like, obviously when you're rock bottom, how did you find the motivation to actually, because I guess that's where some people have a challenge. It's like, yes, I know everyone knows exercise is good for mental health,
Mm,
but I guess obviously as a mental health coach, you'll see a lot of it is just, drug based and medication based. But,
yeah.
it's easy to say just go for a run. And that's what I used to tell people until I kind of hit rock bottom in 2017. And I think for me, when I hit my rock bottom, I signed up for my first half Ironman. So triathlon has actually played such a big role in my life as well. But it is like, how did you find the motivation to actually? Because I mean, I'm sure like a duvet day probably is more on the cards, isn't it? When
And
you're
a hell of a lot
feeling like
easier.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think, I mean, for me, I went public. So I was doing it for a charity that I used to work with a lot back then. And so for me, it was important to be raising money for that charity. But it was more that I had told people I was going to do it. So I set up a fundraising page and I said, I'm doing this and I'm doing that. So I'd kind of created that accountability. Now that doesn't work for lots of people, and that can
Mm,
be pressure, that we put too much pressure on ourselves, and then we talk
yeah.
us that we go, I can't not do it. I can't not do it. I've told all these people, and sometimes the right choice is not to do it. So that's not always the right sort of approach. I think it was partly that thing of, and I wasn't at the bottom, but I'd got as far to the bottom as I wanted to
Yeah.
get, and I knew something had to change. I was stuck in, without going into all the detail, but I was stuck in a
Yeah.
world where I was working ridiculous hours and hadn't got much of a life left, because I'd sort of dug myself into this hole, and I just needed something to latch onto. I
Yeah.
needed a thing that I was going to do on a certain day, that was a fixed point in time, where for that hour, half an hour, whatever it was, the reality of everything else would be suspended, and I'd be doing that thing that let me forget about all the other
Yeah.
things. um So it's different for everybody, and there's no one right way, but it's understanding the thing that I talk to about my clients so much is understanding the story that your mind is telling you. And when your mind is saying, I can't do it, I can't do it,
Mm.
going, okay, so we're just going to go outside the front door. And that's all we need to do. Or we're
Yeah.
going to go and we're going to just run for a few minutes. And, you think, I've got to run, I'm doing a marathon, I've got to run for this long. Just break it down, and as much as your mind is telling you you can't, then challenge it and say, okay, you might not be able to do that full hour run, but you could go for 10 minutes or something, and that's all you need to do. Then you can come back. And most times we know once we get out the door, it's always getting out the door that is the hardest bit
Yeah.
by a mile. But once we're out the door, then we're like, okay, I like this, I'll carry on and I feel better. But it's just reminding ourselves, not in that kind of, oh, you'll feel better once you've done it, because then we're just like, yeah, I know, but I feel crap right now and I don't want to do it. But actually, like, vision how your body feels, vision that it feels better, and trust that if you can get beyond those first few steps, it does get easier from there.
Yeah. I think one of the beautiful things about triathlon, like I went out for a run this morning, and I think it's just the fact that it's so outdoors. That's what I love about it. You are outside, aside from obviously the swims of the winter in the UK, but
Yeah.
it's just, I think there was actually a commercial on, I can't remember who the sponsor was, but they were prescribing nature. And I thought, what world have we gotten to where we actually having to prescribe actually going outside? And that's one of the beautiful, because I've run since I was probably 19, 20. But I think what got me into triathlon is I had actually a chiropractic stand at Castle Howard. This is
Yeah.
probably over 10 years ago. And they stuck me on a hill. I was on my own. I don't think I talked to anyone that whole day, but it was
Oh, I'd come
fine.
and
It
say
was,
hello.
well, I mean, I don't think I signed anyone up, but it was fine. I was just watching this thing that I knew very, very little about. And just like the atmosphere is just, it's palpable. And I
Yeah.
think 2 weeks later, I went to Rat Race and bought my first road bike. And it's just, I've been,
Amazing.
yeah. So I've just, yeah, I've never, it's just, it's incredible. But what I loved about it is that everything is just outdoors, and it's
Yeah.
it's just so good actually. And like you say, I mean, there's a lot of training that you're doing on your own, especially right now because it's winter training. I just started with a coach about 6 weeks ago, but like it's like what you say, it's that self-respect almost,
Yeah.
because I'm training a lot more now than I have in the last few years. But you just, at first you feel tired, but you just feel so much stronger. And
Yeah.
I think when you've got a coach, there's that one, you're paying for it, you don't want to waste it. But also it's just that accountability that is so it just drives you. It's not if, it's actually when am I going to do this?
And I always say to my clients, I agree. And whenever I've had a coach, I absolutely understand that thing of, oh my God, I've got to do it because they're going to see. But I
Yeah.
always say to my clients, you're accountable to yourself. At the end of the day, it doesn't
Yeah.
matter to me whether you do the training or not. Of course, it matters. I care so much about with my
Mm,
clients. But, it's you that has signed up for this goal. It is you that wants to work on these goals. So you're accountable to yourself. And the
yeah.
more you can build in those habits to make it easier for yourself to get it done, so you're hitting your goals, that's where
Yeah.
the power comes, and you supporting yourself the best you can so you can get the best out of it. But yes, it definitely does also help to know
Yeah.
somebody else to be looking at it, and to know that somebody has written it, and that they've got a vision of how they're taking that training forward. So when we
Yeah.
write our own plans, we know that we want to do a swim today, a run there, but we haven't necessarily got all of that kind of understanding behind it. But just to be able to sit back and have the confidence that somebody who spent loads of time studying this thing
Yeah.
knows what they're doing, and I know how I'm going to get you from this point here to that point there to meet your
Yeah.
goal. And all you need to do is just sit back and do all the
Rock up.
training, the easy
Yeah.
bit.
But it is really interesting. My run this morning, it wasn't just an hour run. It was actually, there were some intervals, then there was a slow
Mhm.
pace. And what I find really interesting, and I'm not a really fast runner, but my watch keeps telling me to slow down. And she goes, we're working your endurance. And it's
Mhm.
really interesting. So I'm running with a heart rate monitor. I just find the whole thing quite fascinating. I've never measured anything aside from my speed and just
And
gone for
I'm very
runs.
passionate about an easy run, particularly running. Almost everybody I've ever worked with when I first start working with them is running too fast. So we tend to, if we've got an hour's run to do, we go out and we run as fast as we can to get that run done in the hour that
Yeah.
we've got, very roughly. And if you're only training a few times a week, that's absolutely fine. But if you're training, for something like a half Ironman where there's a lot of training, or you've just got a very busy life, you've got kids, all those things,
Yeah.
that's taking a strain on your body. And when you do that hour run, at the as fast as you can for the time that you've got, you're working harder than you need to, which means that then you're going to be more tired when you get home. So you've got less energy to play with the kids, or you've got less energy for your training session tomorrow, whatever it is. And actually, we get just as much benefit from the slow running as we do from that medium pace running. If we go really fast, then we're getting different benefits. But what I really try and hammer home to people, and it sounds like your coach is working with you on as well, is you do the slow stuff easy stuff easy, so the hard stuff can be hard. And people will say, oh no, I did this run at a 10 out of 10, 10 out of 10 hardness. I'm like, no, you didn't. It's because you're really, really tired from all the other runs that it felt like 10 out of 10. It's only about a 7 out of 10. Try doing everything else easy, then you'll be able to do a real 10 out of 10. So again, we're getting different training benefits when we work at that much higher intensity. So yeah, keep the easy stuff easy, keep the other stuff hard, unless we're doing race pace and then we're training race pace. But at this time of year, for most of us who aren't racing for a good few months yet, it's just about building that base with the easy stuff, which has less fatigue, but also less chance of injury. When we run faster, there's more load going through, so there's more chance of picking up injuries, and injuries are miserable, but they also then stop us building up that consistent training.
What would you say, like, obviously you're mainly a female women's triathlon coach, is that right?
Yeah.
So what is the difference? And you say in your intro, which I quite like, is like, we have to stop treating women like small men. Can you tell us a little, talk about, like, dive into the differences between a female athlete, just in general, not necessarily in triathlon, and versus a woman? What are the main differences that you see?
Do you mean between a female and a male, or between a female? Yes, yeah. I mean, first of all, just to say that the vast majority of sports science, of medical science, of what we read in the papers, in a magazine or whatever, is based on men. Most research is done on men, and that's for partly up until very relatively recently. It was actually illegal to do research on women because we needed to be just there to have babies, and we don't want to be doing anything that might mess with that. The laws changed in Europe and more recently in the States, so that we can now test on women to the same degree as men.
Was that in the 70s that changed?
I'm useless on years, but I think it's even more recently in the States, in Europe, and now you have to justify in a funding proposal if you are only testing single sex, if you're only doing your science based on single sex, you have to justify why. Whereas but it's a recent change.
I've read this, and I tell this to my patients too, because they're like, we talk about cholesterol with women as well, like. I'm like, well, we have way more sex hormones. So I don't know, naturally, shouldn't we have a little bit more? I don't know. I'm not a medical doctor, but it's all those things. And I say, well, women aren't studying. They say, why? I said, we're too complex. We're too expensive. So if you have to put so many research articles out in a year, and you're going to put some women in there, well, it's going to take you a very, very long time, because you're going to have women cycling exactly the same way.
Yeah, you have to control for the menstrual cycle. The ridiculous thing is that we've accepted that our menstrual cycle might have an impact on whatever it is that they're testing for, and therefore they can't test on women because our menstrual cycle might affect the thing that they're testing on. But we're not then doing the research to say, well, if your menstrual cycle is that big a deal, why aren't we looking to see how it affects women when they're doing training for a half Ironman or whatever? And it's changing. We are getting better now. We have more research going towards looking at how women are impacted by things, or just including women in a sample size. So we're looking at something general, and we're looking at men and women. But the problem is that up until very relatively recently, if you went to somebody talking, a magazine article that you read in Runner's World or something, will talk about people, and what they really mean is men, and they haven't differentiated, and they haven't said whether what they're saying is the same for women or for women as for men. So in terms of the difference for women, the main difference is we have different hormones to men. We know that, we all know that, but that can have a significant impact on things. So when I'm working with women who have a menstrual cycle, one of the main things is, how does that menstrual cycle affect your training? There's lots of research out there that would say there's different times of your cycle that you should be doing different exercise. So at certain points of your cycle, you should be doing more strength training. At certain points of your cycle, you should be doing more endurance training. Whilst that's true at a kind of, what do you call it, like a molecular level, there hasn't been much research to prove that actually comes through in how we when we look at women doing it, does it have that much of an impact? And my experience of working with women is, it's a battle to get the training in, full stop. So if we put anything more complicated in, it's just a barrier to the training happening. So rather than going down to that level of detail, the main thing I'll say to women is, when do you feel at your worst? And let's make sure you have a rest week around the days or the time when you feel at your worst. And for anybody I work with, male, female, whatever age, I'll always say we should have a rest week every 3 to 4 weeks. That doesn't mean we do
Oh,
nothing in
wow.
that rest week, but we do less volume, we do less intensity, because we have to remember we don't get fitter from training, we get fitter from recovery from training. And if we just keep on training and training and training
Yeah.
whilst we're doing more, our body's just breaking down, and not getting time to recover. So we need those rest weeks so that our body recovers before we then start building up again.
Okay.
And so with somebody who, because of their menstrual cycle, has maybe 3 or 4 days where they just don't feel so good, we'll put the rest week there. And women always resist it and go, no, no, no. And it's not about giving in to your menstrual cycle. It's saying you're going to feel like crap anyway. Exercise is generally good for when you're not feeling so good in terms of your menstrual cycle, but let's not make you do a really hard session where you're just going to feel like you're failing. And so often women will say, oh, I haven't really tracked it, I hadn't realized. Once they start tracking it, they're like, oh, right, that's why I always feel like that then. And we're so kind of unconnected to our body. We're so busy looking at all these different, our watches that tell us this, that, and the other, that we forget to go, oh, this is when I feel at my worst. So it just means you're not beating yourself up for sessions that you can't do. And you can then do the sessions that are the really key sessions when you're feeling at your strongest. So that's one sort of really simple adaptation that I would encourage any woman to make in terms of their training. We then need to look at what happens as we approach perimenopause. And as we approach perimenopause and our hormones start, first of all, fluctuating, which leads us in all sorts of uncomfortable situations, just everything feels a lot harder.
It's
but then
just
we
a
get
shit show, really.
well, yes, I was trying to keep my language, but yes,
You can
100%
swear on
agree.
my podcast. It's
Yes,
okay.
there's not really any other option when you're talking about perimenopause,
Yeah.
is there? But then particularly as our estrogen starts declining, we find it much harder to put on muscle. We find it much harder to retain our bone. And those are two risk factors for our everyday life, for our health in general, but particularly for our training. So recognizing that our bone density is going to decline, it declines for everybody from about sort of 25 years onwards. But for women, that decrease accelerates as we go through perimenopause. And then again, it's harder to put on muscle as we go through menopause, perimenopause into menopause. We need to make sure we're training for that. So before we get anywhere near menopause, making sure we've strengthened our bones, built up that muscle mass, so we've got a good amount to take in as it starts to decline, and then doing what we can to minimize the loss as we go through perimenopause. And that's things like doing strength training to make sure that we're preserving our bones, doing plyometrics to make sure we're strengthening our bones, making sure we're taking on enough protein so we're protecting our muscle again. So things like that. So those are the kind of things that we just want to pay extra attention to as women. Then there's other things, like things that people never talk about, like making sure we're comfortable on a saddle. We have a different, we've got different bits down there to what men have. Again, most saddles are based on a male anatomy. And so people never talk about just making sure you're comfortable on a saddle. It's such an uncomfortable thing to bring up, which I will talk till I'm blue in the face about it, because it's not talked about enough.
Well, please recommend one for me, because I'm about to get on my bike for many hours.
So we have, so apparently as females, we have 8 different presentations of kind of how we're shaped down there. So there is no one recommendation. What's right for me is not right for another person. Okay. It obviously then depends as we get more into our time trialing position. So when we're leaning forwards, tilting forwards more, that can have more of an impact. But things like making sure we've got a lovely smooth pedal stroke. If you think about it, every time you push your foot down, you bounce off the saddle a tiny bit and bounce back down again. So if you're doing, 90 pedal strokes per minute and you're going boom, 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 boom on the saddle, that is not comfortable, especially when you're on English roads, which tend to not to be very smooth either. Yeah. So making sure you've got a nice smooth pedal stroke, but spending time finding the saddle that works for you. A good bike shop or a good bike fitter will let you try different saddles. Make sure that you found the best option for you. Things like vaginal dryness, which gets much more impactful, or more incidents of it as we go through perimenopause. I think up to 80% of women suffer from vaginal dryness. It's never talked about. That can be really uncomfortable when we're cycling, but also when we're running, and if our pants are sort of just gently rubbing. So things like vaginal estrogen, which even if hormone therapy is contraindicated for a woman, localized vaginal estrogen can make a big difference there, and that can be life-changing in terms of just how comfortable you feel when you're running and cycling. So then there's body issues, which men obviously have experience body confidence issues as well. But I think as women, we are so judged by our body through life, judge ourselves, and so again, there's just so many issues around fueling, all of those sort of things. So it's just different things that are issues with men, but probably we need to emphasize them slightly differently when we're working with women.
Do you find, because I started doing, we talked about this before we got on the
Mm,
podcast. I've been intermittent fasting for quite a number of years. And then it was my
mm,
sister who's a naturopath. She said, you need to be introduced to Mindy Pels. So, and I think a
yep,
lot of people who are listening are probably familiar with her. So she does Fast Like a Girl is her main book.
yep.
And so I started following her kind of 28-day protocol probably about 2 years ago. And so one of the interesting things is it's right before you have your period or you bleed, is your progesterone is obviously trying to come in. And so because progesterone, they say, is so sensitive to stress, fasting is although it's a hermetic stress, it is still a stress. And I guess high into, that training for a triathlon 5, 6 days a week is also stressful. So do you find that I guess I'm always conscious because obviously, you sometimes go for a run, you're like, why was that so shit? And then
Yep.
sometimes, and now that I've been tracking my cycle for the first time in my life, the last 2 years, you can start seeing, you feel we're different. We're women and we are almost different. It's like living with Jekyll and Hyde, if you've
Yeah. Yep.
it's especially as we get to perimenopause, but because everything's starting to shift. But it's really interesting, I've found, to really understand your body as a woman.
Yep.
And so now that I'm trying to do more training, it is interesting. But that for that week before you have your period or you bleed, they do recommend that week you just don't fast or your maximum fast about 13 hours. So do you find with your female clients, do you see a trend that it is actually in that phase or is it very mixed?
So we have different throughout our period. We have different phases where we burn more fat, where we burn more carbohydrate.
Mm,
And so I would always say, rather than following strict rules, to listen to your body and experiment with different things and see what works for you. Because you can say, you should do this, you should do that, but every woman, every body is different. So
mm,
learning what works for you and learning to listen to our body. Again, we got so used to, looking at apps that tell us stuff and
yeah.
just getting back in contact with our body and going, if that run felt bad, then maybe there's something I could do differently. I mean, in terms of fasting, I am a massive, massive advocate of fueling all of your training.
Yeah.
I don't believe in fasting. And what's good about Mindy Peltz is that she is speaking to women specifically. There's so
Yeah.
much, again, guidance out there about fasting that doesn't even recognize, that women have hormones. So,
Mm,
so she's very much done it from a perspective of talking to women and how their hormones respond through the cycle. But what she isn't really talking about is active women. And I've heard
yeah.
her interviewing Stacey Sims. Stacey Sims is one of the people who's kind of most popularized the idea of making sure that we train as women. That we need the evidence and the sports science to back up how to train as women, but that we need to respect our cycle and everything. And Stacey Sims is very much from the active women side of things. And even when Mindy Peltz was interviewing Stacey Sims, she I'll get this the right way around. Mindy was saying, yes, I can see that if you are that active, you need to be fueling your training because, as you say, training is a stress, fasting is a stress, life is a stress,
Yeah.
menopause is a
Yeah.
stress. Why would we put another stress onto our body? And if you think about it, if you're going out and you're trying to train for a session, if you're just doing a half-hour run or something, our body's got enough energy on board to deal with an hour up to potentially 90 minutes of easy exercise. But if you're doing much more than that, unless you're properly in ketosis and you're training in ketosis the whole time, which I would argue you can't really do a half Ironman on because,
No.
just the energy needs are so severe of, keeping yourself fueled. We need to fuel what we're doing. We need to fuel our training. Why would we go out and do a session with less energy on board than what we need? And you can either say, okay, yep, I'll definitely fuel all my training from now on, or you can say, I'll give it a go and I'll try doing a
Yeah.
session fueled and I'll try doing at the same time of the month a session unfueled and I'll see how I feel. And if I feel fine, whether I'm fueled or not, then that's your choice. But so many people, once they actually start fueling, realize how much better they feel. And this isn't about taking on a whole load of stuff. And again, as women, we get so sort of hung up on burning calories and we don't want to put on
Yeah.
weight and everything. And I implore everybody to try and think of our training as training because we feel better and because it's building
Yeah.
towards our goals rather than because it's burning calories, but it's so locked in there. But I'm not talking about coming out with a calorie surplus. I'm talking about giving yourself the energy that you need to burn
Yeah.
in that session so you get a better quality session and so you're less likely to get injured afterwards. Because if
Yeah.
you especially again as women, we are very vulnerable to losing muscle, particularly in perimenopause, and we have to really fight to hold on to that muscle. If we've burnt all the energy we've got going for us, then our body starts to break down the protein in our body, the muscle in our body for energy, and then we're losing that muscle that we've just worked so hard to build. So making sure ideally fueling our training, and if not, making sure at least we fuel our recovery. So as soon as we get in, we have a shorter recovery window than men do. So within sort of 30 to 40 minutes that we're having some carbs and we're having some protein. So our body's got what it needs to do, what it needs to rebuild it. Because again, we don't get faster from training, we get faster from recovery from training, and we need to give the body what it needs to recover.
Can you just explain briefly for anyone who doesn't know what ketosis is? Can you just explain briefly what that is?
So ketosis, sorry, I should have said, ketosis is the point at which we have removed the carbohydrate from our diet to the point that our body starts burning ketones rather than carbohydrates. And ketones, and because I don't work on this anymore, I've spent so much time saying don't do it, and now I just don't do it. So I'm shaky on the details because I haven't talked about it for so long. But ketones are, I believe, something that's produced in our body that allows us to then burn energy that isn't coming from carbohydrate. But it's a process your body has to go through, and you have to get to that point of ketosis. And as soon as you put some more carbs back in the system, then you're sort of preventing that process from happening. You can also consume exogenous, so external ketones, and all the Tour de France cyclists are doing that now. So they're very expensive and they taste like nail polish, and I can't see why you'd want to do it. And there's benefits from it as well. When we get to ketosis, so many people, I've never done it myself, but talk about that clear-headed feeling, just feeling fresher. But I would still say if you're training significantly, then you've got to kind of weigh up those two things and find what's going to work best for you.
Yeah, it's a tough one because obviously this is like one of the reasons I'm doing this is so I can learn as I go. And I guess, one of the things they say is if you like, especially at about 17 hours of fasting, you get into what they call autophagy.
Yeah.
I think I say that right. In different countries, they call it just different. But, and I guess that is when the cells get to clean up. So it's really, and then they talk about 24-hour fasts, which are, Mindy Pels refers to as gut resets. And then the 3 to 5 day fast you would never do with this intense training, but they say that is when stem cells are, produced. And if you have, like, for example, a lot of midlife women get frozen shoulder, I see it in practice all the time, or recovering from like an ACL injury or anything like that. They say 3 to 5 day water fasts are really great because the stem cells are released and they go to the point because the body's quite an amazing machine. But you wouldn't be training obviously in those 3 to 5 days. So it's really trying to find a balance. And like you say, every woman is different.
Yeah, and I think, if somebody had cancer or something, so that I say it differently to you, and now I can't remember, autophagy,
yes,
anyway, that word that you
autophagy
said.
or autophagy, anyway, they are the same thing.
So where all the cleaners come in and clean up your body and everything, and that's where you get to when you've been in that fasting state for long enough. If you're particularly high risk, like I say, if you've got cancer or you're worried that, there's a reason that you're more worried, maybe that's your priority. But then I would still say if that's your priority, then you need to be wary that you're putting your body under too much stress by then training at the same time as well. So maybe it's about doing phased fasts. And, like you say, you could do, if personally, I cannot imagine doing a 3 to 5 day fast, but, if you do that and if that's helping with the shoulder and everything, but then you'd need to do some separate training where you are actually fueling the training.
Yeah. It's all just very interesting because everything is different. And I get, from people like, we'll get a patient, they say, well, they told me to do something, different. And you get conflicting messages all the time. And I guess the beauty of science is it's constantly evolving. What we're doing today in 10 years time, they might look back and say, well, that was a bit silly.
Yeah, completely.
What we're seeing all the time right now, actually.
Yeah, and there's so many fads, and again, as perimenopausal women, we have to be so aware that there's now, people have noticed there's a lot of us finally, and they want to sell us stuff, and so there's a load of stuff, and you need to just be able to separate out the marketing from the actual science and know what's actually, going to help you, which is partly just about learning what works for you and your body.
But I think there's also a lot of supplements and vitamins and things, and because that industry is not regulated. There's so many people posing as menopause experts, yet they don't really understand the biochemistry and the physiology of like the behind this. It's such a complex thing. You really need to understand all the pathways to really understand and do the right tests. So I think it's anyone looking for a menopause expert, make sure you do your research and find somebody who is actually properly trained and really knows what they're doing.
Definitely. And if we go, oh, but it's natural, it can't do any harm. Well, nicotine at the end of the day is natural. There's lots of things that are natural, they can still do harm. But also if you're giving it the credit that it's going to do you that much good, you're admitting it has power. So it must also have power to be risky as well, or just be a waste of money. And, there are some things which I would absolutely advocate people taking. So I'm not against supplements, but I would 100% agree with what you just said, that, make sure that you actually need to take it and it's not going to do you more harm than good.
Yeah. And some of them are expensive. I'm like, you're paying, I was
Really
looking at one
expensive.
yesterday. I was like, pay £68 a month for this. I'm like, you don't really need to spend 60. You can get that cheaper and very good quality as well. So,
Yeah,
watch how you're spending your money as well.
yeah.
Are there any, so while you talk about supplements, are there any supplements that you find, I think everyone's different, so try not to take just what your girlfriend is taking because that might not be what you want, but is
Yeah.
there like, are there a certain supplements that you find most midlife women would benefit from aside from vitamin
So
D,
I would
obviously
say
living in this
vitamin
country?
D, everybody, yeah,
Yeah.
at least in the winter months, and particularly as athletes, yeah. So vitamin D, unless that's for some reason contraindicated, then 100%. Um, I always get my six and my three. It's omega threes, isn't
Three.
it?
Yeah, you're gonna want three.
That
Yeah.
went a flashback to what I always used to get them the wrong way around, and then I suddenly went, I'm going to say it wrong.
No.
So yeah, omega threes, you can be getting that through your diet, obviously if you're eating enough oily fish and stuff, but
Yeah.
that's making sure we're getting enough. And I think there's increasing evidence that, as well as all the general health benefits, particularly in terms of our brain, both in terms of mental health, happiness, but
Yeah.
also brain functioning, it can make a big difference.
Is there a certain, because oil, just as a
Mm,
side, because oil can go rancid, it's really important when you get your fish oil to make sure it is high quality, ideally stored in glass or, you know,
exactly.
just to make sure it is good quality. Otherwise, the rancidity can cause quite a lot of damage.
Just as many problems as the not having it.
Yeah.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
100%. And then beyond that, creatine, I think if people are experiencing brain fog, so creatine has been well taken in the kind of muscle building world for
Yeah.
a long time, but particularly for women experiencing brain fog, then creatine can make a significant difference. I think that's pretty much accepted and proven now.
Yeah.
If you're taking it, you'll often see the advice is to do a loading phase where you do a much higher amount at first. That's more if you're doing it for the muscle building properties, and often women will
Okay.
experience gastric distress. So just doing 3 to 5 grams a day, and you can phase that throughout the day, so you're not glugging it all down in one go. You normally get as a powder, so don't take it all down in one go, but phase it throughout
Yeah.
the day if you're getting stomach issues.
Is there a
Protein.
brand?
I think that the most creatine is fine if you're having issues. I've heard people talk about a German make called, I think it's Crea Pure,
Okay.
which is good if you're having issues. I haven't tried it myself. I've been fine
Okay.
with the cheapy one, and it doesn't seem to have done me.
Okay.
It seems to be working okay for me.
Okay.
I think it's less important. It's more important with things like the omega threes to be getting a really
Yeah.
good
Yeah. Yeah.
quality one.
Okay.
The one which I haven't said, which I probably should have said first, is just protein, and that doesn't have to be as a supplement. But often women tend to be more vegetarian than men, and it's harder to get enough protein in
Yeah.
as a vegetarian. It's absolutely possible, but it is harder. So
Yeah.
generally, as a active woman, and especially a perimenopausal woman, we probably should be aiming for at least 1.5 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight. We might want to go up as high as 2.5.
Okay.
But for most women, that is so high that I don't even bother saying that because it's just a
Yeah.
barrier that feels too high. So at least trying to get up to 1 gram per kilogram of body weight. But I
Okay.
would say for most active women who are doing a lot of training, and then when we're in perimenopause, so we're more vulnerable to that muscle loss, more closer to 1.5 grams per kilo of body weight. As I say, that does not have to be from a protein powder at all.
Yeah.
If you can get it naturally, go for it.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
But it is quite hard to get in, especially for a vegetarian, and you're trying to get it in that 20 to 30 or 30 to 40 minutes post exercise.
Yeah.
Sometimes a shake is the easiest way. For me, I'd say don't go with one of the ones that's got all the artificial sugars and all the stuff in
Yeah.
there. I just go for a pure protein powder, whether it's a vegan one or a whey protein, and then I just
Yeah.
mix it myself.
Yeah.
And then the other one, which very no, I'd say those are the main ones I would
Yeah.
recommend as kind of pretty much for most people. And then there's specifics, things like magnesium and stuff can help with sleep, can help with
Yeah.
various different issues. But I would say that's more for individual people. And I would generally say for most things we should be testing. So vitamin D, we know we're going to be deficient in the winter.
Yeah. Yeah.
Magnesium is hard to test at a cellular level, so it's hard,
Yeah.
the test is less meaningful. But for most things, don't just willy-nilly take things. Get a test
Mm.
and see if you're deficient before
Yeah.
starting to spend lots of money on things.
Yeah, absolutely. I think testing, but like you said, magnesium is a tough one to test. So if they test and they say
Yeah,
you're fine, that doesn't
doesn't
necessarily
mean
mean that you're
anything.
optimal
Yep.
either. So,
Yep.
um, how important is strength training for women? I actually missed my weights class this morning to go for a run. I know. So I've got nativity later this afternoon. I just thought, do I go to my weights training class or do I go for my run? And I went for my run because I'm a bit of a cardio junkie. But Yeah, I've recognized the importance as I get to, nearing my 50s. But yeah, how important is it? Even for, I think what's important is some people, some women listening to this could, even like you said, you weren't that active, like a fitness junkie when you were younger, and here you are, you're a triathlon coach and you've done Ironman and everything like that. I think sometimes women can feel, and men can probably feel a bit
Yeah,
daunted. And I say to like, I'm starting to, even my patients in their 70s, 80s, I'm telling them to go get some, some dumbbells, like light ones, just, and
yeah,
the ones who have started and kept with it, they feel younger, like they
yeah.
just feel stronger, like especially my patients in their 70s, like
That's
they just
amazing.
feel so much better. I'm
Yeah,
like, it doesn't have to be heavy. Go get yourself some 2.5 kg weights and do
yeah,
it 3 times a week. And here's your routine.
yeah.
But how
No,
important is it? Like even if you're a completely sedentary woman or man listening, I mean, you can still get some dumbbells and just do a really
yeah,
easy sequence, 3, 4, I don't know how many, you can say how many times a
yeah.
week they should be doing that.
So in answer to the question, really important. Um, Again, and I hate to keep on going on about it, but it is a
Mm.
significant issue. We do lose muscle as we go through perimenopause and as we get older for men as
Yeah.
well. And losing that muscle, obviously, we know we need our muscles to run, to cycle and everything, but we need our muscles to get up off the toilet, to
Yeah.
get up off the couch. So as we get older, we've seen our parents or whoever get older around us, and we've seen how much they struggle to move. And a lot of that is just physical strength. So being able to support ourselves well into, midlife and beyond, we need to maintain that muscle strength. I had one client who broke her ankle earlier this year, but she was still able to get around because she had the upper body strength to be able to get
Yeah.
around on her crutches and everything. And so, and she was so grateful that she'd been doing so much strength and conditioning that she felt that she could still get around. So yeah, it's really, really important. What we don't want to do is just make the mistake of just doing strength work.
Yeah.
So we need to make sure we're doing mobility and stability. So by mobility, I mean making sure we've got mobility at the joints. So before we go for a run, doing just 5 minutes of loosening up our hips, particularly. We get really tight at our hips, then we can't do our sort of full range of motion as we run. We can't engage our glutes properly. Then we get injured because we're not engaging our glutes properly. So doing some mobility work before we go for a run, before we do strength and conditioning, and ideally just a few minutes every day, so that we're counteracting, the forces of aging, so we don't again turn into this old person who's all creaky and can't move. And we felt what our body feels like when
Yeah.
we feel like, oh my god, I've got old, everything hurts. Doing some mobility work can help to loosen that up and help to kind of make us feel like we can move again. Stability work is things like calf raises, things like glute work, little exercises, the kind of boring stuff that the physio is probably
Yeah.
giving you at some point that we don't like doing, but which is so important for ensuring that stability at our joints. So for example, as we run and our foot hits the ground, our hip doesn't drop down or our knee doesn't cave in. So doing that as a warm up to then doing our strength work, and our strength work can be in the gym with weights, it can be at home with body weight, it can be at
Yeah.
home with some weights. For your 70-year-olds, I'd 100% agree, just get some light dumbbells or whatever.
Yeah.
But for women who are fairly active, I think for so long we've been told, oh, get the baked beans out the cupboard and do the exercises with the
It's not
baked beans
enough.
or whatever.
Yeah.
We want to be going heavy. So if you've never strength trained in your life, don't listen. Well, listen to what I'm saying, but don't
Yeah.
take it on straight away. So if you've never trained in your life, just start doing some body weight squats, some lunges, some deadlift, Google how to do them, and just get used to connecting your brain to your body, getting that movement, and starting to feel like you own your body again.
Yeah.
You're in control, connecting to your body. But then as you get sort of stronger and more confident, we want to be working more in the, I would say, 5 to 10 rep range. So that means if I'm doing, say lunges, or squats, whatever I'm doing,
Yeah.
I do say 5 to 8, and then I feel like I could do one or two more. So I'm not getting to the point where my technique's completely gone. I could do one or two more, but I couldn't do more than that. So going heavy. And for some people, that means that they're going to be lifting their body weight or even more than their body weight on a bar or something. Now, again, don't let that put you off. That's not where you
Yeah.
need to get to straight away, but that's where I want to see people getting to. So we're making sure that we really are training heavy enough that we're getting the stimulus we need. We're not trying to put on muscle, we're trying to strengthen our muscles.
Yeah.
And that's a difference, trying to get some power in there as well. And that's trying to counteract the impacts of getting older. When people say, but I don't like the gym, gyms are different these days. There are so many more classes for women. There's so many more small group training. So you don't have to have your individual PT, but you work together in a group, you motivate each other. So it's worth checking out what your local gym has got. But it could be at home. I run a weekly online class and people aren't going as heavy as I would like them to because they haven't
Right.
got the weights at home that are heavy enough, but it's
Yeah.
still better than nothing and they're doing it every week. And that's the most important thing. Talking to friends, see if there's option, doing stuff outdoors. The one thing I'd be sort of cautious about is something like body pump or a circuits class is really a cardio class. Yes, you're doing
Yeah.
some muscle work, and if you've never done anything with weights before, absolutely. But once you get to the point where those weights are feeling comfortable, it's really a cardio class rather than a sort of strengthening
Right.
your muscle
Interesting.
class.
Okay.
And so somebody, for example, somebody like yourself who's doing a half Ironman training, I'd say that's detracting from your half Ironman training because it's tiring you out from doing the sessions, the sessions that are on your
Right.
plan. Instead, you want to be doing something that's going to give you more quality by doing heavier weights. But if that's the only option, if you know you're never
Yeah.
going to go to the gym by yourself and the only option is you'll do that body pump class, brilliant, because at least you're doing that. It's still
Yeah.
better than not doing something else.
So I should have gone to my weights class this morning,
Well, no, but I would always say don't do weights before running. So you've done
hey?
it right,
Okay.
you've done your run, you can still do
Okay.
some weights now.
Okay. It's also weight training. I think because women have testosterone, that also tanks as we get older. So
Yeah.
I think, the weight training does actually help maintain our testosterone as well.
Yeah.
Um,
And we
and
feel once we get over that bit of I hate it, we
yeah,
start to feel good when you get that confidence to start going a little bit heavier and you do a session in the gym and you come out and go, yeah, I did that.
I
Like that
know.
that
I know you
confidence
feel
comes through.
strong. Yeah.
Yeah.
And the other thing it does is as you build muscle, it's also a storage site for glucose. So
I meant to
as
say that at the beginning when I
yeah,
was saying all the
yeah.
importance. Yeah.
But I think that's so, as women go through menopause and beyond, our risk for type 2 diabetes goes up because we don't have the storage anymore.
Yeah.
So, and
Yeah.
it just makes you frail. You can't, I mean, you should be carrying your own suitcases, into your
Yeah.
70s, 80s, well, that's how I hope to do it, so.
Yeah.
And I always tell my patients, I said, right now, especially the ones in their 30s, I'm like, this is bank time. Like, this is like your pension pot. If you don't do it now, you're going to have nothing left and life's not going to be much fun. So you don't want to
100%
not have any
agree.
money at the end, but you also don't want to have you don't want to be like all your reserves and health be done because you didn't do anything. So it's like you
And
say, you
people
sometimes call it the boring stuff. It is I really don't like weight training. Like, really don't. If I do, I find it really boring, even though the woman who runs our class is, she's Scottish. She's great and it's good fun. But yeah, I still would rather do anything cardio based, but it is important.
but think of it as that key to unlock that cardio stuff because if you
Yeah.
start getting injured then you're not doing the cardio, and so that strength training is to try and prevent those injuries from occurring. So
Yeah.
think of it as you've got to do, in order to do the cardio you've got to do that strength training, or not got to, but strongly
Yeah.
recommended to do that strength training.
Got to bank some muscle. Hey. One of the things I was reading is like at what peak we tend to over surpass men actually at some point in terms of endurance
Mm.
sport. What age? I mean, it was quite motivating almost. They say some women will actually peak in their late 40s, early 50s. Is that true? Is there quite good evidence to support that?
I don't know that particular stat. I would say based on my own experience of
Yeah.
perimenopause I can't think of anything less likely to be true.
Oh, really? Because well, it was maybe a man writing it, but they was actually saying that women actually, yeah, that they peak later in endurance versus men, and oftentimes it's in their late 40s.
I still think that the people setting the records or something are going to be younger than that. I guess it depends what we're measuring. I mean, if you look at the most
No,
recent,
but I mean when you're
I
comparing that age group, I suppose.
yeah, right. And I mean, if you look at the most recent Ironman World Championships, there's certainly a lot of women there who are not spring chickens, who are still racing
Mm,
strong and stuff. And there's been loads of examples of women at the kind of ultra distance race, so ultra cycling that I do.
yeah.
Fiona Kolbinger won the Transcontinental a few years ago, beating the men outright. And then we had, I've completely forgotten her name, Yasmin, anyway, the ultra runner. So,
And
we
how
have
old were they?
women, they're not young. Or,
Okay.
Fiona's probably, she's not old. Anyway, I guess that example that women can outrun, I guess I'm talking more about women actually just outrunning men in ultra endurance races, whatever the age.
Yes,
In
okay.
terms of getting stronger as we get older, I don't know. I don't know that. So, yeah, couldn't say either way. What I would say is it's important, again, male or female, as we get older, not to just be doing the endurance stuff. So we want to keep
Yeah.
in that intensity in there. So whilst we may be getting stronger at endurance as we get older, that's a lot of the time that's because we go, oh, I can't do the fast stuff anymore. I'll just
Yeah.
focus on the long, easy, relatively, easier pace. But it's really important to try and keep some high intensity training in there. Partly, as you said, in terms of the glucose, in terms of our metabolism, so making sure we're getting that glucose uptake. So doing some high intensity stuff helps to regulate our glucose uptake better.
Yeah.
But also just if we will get slower if we don't if we don't still do the
Yeah.
fast stuff. So again, keeping the easy stuff easy, but keeping some intensity in there.
Yeah. It's a little bit like the fasting. She talks about fast and feast. You're
Yeah,
not starving yourself and then you're not gorging yourself. So it's kind of
yeah,
teaching your body to find to do the balance. It was
yeah,
interesting though, because I was signing up for the Outlaw. It's in
yeah,
May.
yeah,
And I was looking at some of the times and I was like, the age categories go into like 70s. And
yeah,
actually, it was really interesting when I was looking because I guess you probably see this. Obviously, I'm late 40s, so my kids are older. I have more time. You still work, but I
yeah.
have more time. I'm not, I don't have toddlers running around anymore. Um, do you find that there's more women triathletes starting to emerge in that category,
It's
or do
hard
you
for me
not?
to tell. I haven't looked at the numbers. I've looked recently at the numbers overall and been shocked and appalled at how few women do triathlon and do Ironman and everything, and
Yeah,
how
well, you did
much
say
I
that
am.
earlier. Yeah.
Yeah. But I would say I am definitely seeing more and more female clients coming to me in perimenopause, whether that's that
Hmm.
I've got better at doing my marketing, so those
Yeah,
people
you're
come to
right.
me. Whether that's, as you say, as people get older, they have more potentially disposable income, but certainly time, so they're more likely to look at those longer distance races. And I think it is changing. I think there are more women doing, whether it's Ironman or triathlon, but that gender balance, it's still massively skewed to men, but it is starting to change. Although I saw the London Marathon for 2025, I think is equal
Yeah.
gender balance, which is
Is
amazing.
it?
I don't know if that's
That's
because
brilliant.
no, I don't know if they accept you based on whether you're whether they've set the limit so that it's equal, or
Okay.
whether it's just based on applications. But that's amazing to see. But we're not there in triathlon yet. So I don't know how. I'm certainly seeing a change, but I think that's because of the bubble that I live in, rather than
Yeah.
because it's necessarily changing across the board. But yeah, I would agree with you that as your children grow up and things, it becomes easier potentially to fit in the training until you start worrying about your parents as well, and then you've
Yeah.
got different
Yeah.
caring responsibilities. But yeah,
Yeah. Or you move across the pond and you leave it all
well,
to your
yes.
sister, which is what I've done. That sounds awful. You mentioned in your description, obviously, you are also a trained mental health coach.
Yeah.
So how does that come into your training? How do you weave that in?
So I'm a mental health and exercise coach,
Yeah.
and that is very much about, well, there's two sides to it. One side is making sure that we can find the mental health benefits of exercise. So trying to help people who are, who have whether they're depressed, whether they've got anxiety, whether there's something impacting on their mental health, trying to help them find the form of exercise that is just going to help to make them feel better. And that's, a goal in itself. And that
Yeah.
is, yeah. The other side of it is that, and again, I'd say probably sadly, particularly as women, we tend to beat ourselves up over exercise. So whether that's
Yeah.
about our body shape, whether that's about our times, everybody else is faster than me, everybody else is better than me, all of that. So it's working with my clients to try and unpick some of that so that rather than exercise being this thing that we beat ourselves up with, it becomes something that is just genuinely, we get that pleasure and that benefit
Yeah.
from. And particularly I'll start working with people who are obsessed with trying to get a certain time, whether it's a PB, whether it's beating this person or whatever. And for me, the victory is whether they get that time or not when they decide it doesn't matter anymore. Not because they've
Okay.
given up, not because they're like, oh, I can never do it, I'll just give up and whatever, but because
Yeah.
they go, I'm good enough as a person in myself, I don't
Yeah.
need a
Yeah.
number to prove anything. So yeah, it's those two. I mean, there's lots of sides to it, but it's those two main sides. One is finding the mental health benefit of exercise, but secondly, working with our mindset to stop ourselves from being our own worst enemy, for
Yeah.
putting barriers there that stop us doing exercise, stop us doing everything else in life as well. And what we can learn through exercise, we can apply to other areas of life. So I've
Yeah.
got loads of examples of clients who I've worked with on something related to their training, but then that gets their payback through their whole life because they can go and do that presentation they were too scared to do, or whatever it is. So
Yeah.
it's working on our mindset so we can get the best out of ourselves.
It's so important. You see the physical education dropping in, state primary schools especially. And
Yeah,
it's, you and I know how much, it's exercise has helped us through, stressful times in our life. And it is a little bit of a worry. I think people are worried about our generation. I mean, I'm a little bit concerned as the sport pretty much dwindles to almost nothing.
yeah,
If the school
yeah.
halls
And
take in,
especially women again, or girls, you see the boys carry on playing football, and I think
yes.
again that's changing, but
Yeah.
it goes up to a certain age, and then not universally, but girls get to about sort of 12, 14 or something, and then
Yeah. You
body
see, there's a
body
drops
conscious
off a
become.
cliff, doesn't it?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And so the more that we can do to change that so that people have that, the confidence and the knowledge from doing sport as a young child, but then just,
Yeah.
things to carry on doing. Yeah.
Yeah. Then I guess I'm just, I don't know what else we would do on weekends, but my kids have always done a lot of sport. Um,
Yep.
but yeah, it was interesting because my daughter was a swimmer, so she used to swim 6, 7 days a week. And I remember talking
Wow.
to her hockey coach, and he goes, one day the research will come out on how unhealthy this is, especially like these girls are just coming on to like they're all going through these massive hormone shifts, 12,
Yep.
13, and they're
Yep.
training and they're getting up at like, I mean, some days we were up at 5,
Yep.
quarter to 5, I think, some mornings. It's just brutal on their bodies. Because our hockey coach said one day this will, the research will come out and reveal itself because he
Yeah.
goes, it's so not healthy for them. But
And so
we'll
often
see.
it's seen as normal to not have a period at that age and or
I
to start
know.
really late. And it's, I'm training hard enough. If I have my period, it's because I'm not training hard enough. Whereas now we know, I hope we as a, community know you have to, your period is a sign that everything's okay with your body.
Yes.
It's
Yeah.
not okay to lose your body because you're training hard. And if you are, we need to work with your coach or
Yeah.
whatever to do something about that.
Yeah.
But again, I think that's slowly changing. But from
Yeah.
what I hear, I don't work with kids at all anymore. But from what I hear, that's still, that message isn't universally accepted or kind of talked about.
Yeah.
But yeah, I've got
I
hope.
don't,
I've got hope for
yeah,
the
I don't think
future.
the cycle is actually talked about really. Because I mean, so many young girls, they'll have problems with their cycle. It's a whole new podcast, but they'll have problems with their cycle, or they'll be, their mood will be low, or they're, because the shift in hormone, they're not really
Mm.
explained what on earth is going on. So they're given the pill or an antidepressant even at quite a young age. And
And the
actually,
pill is not giving you a cycle, it's just
no,
suppressing what's going on.
exactly.
And normally it's a male
Yes.
coach, and the male coach doesn't want to talk to you about periods or whatever. And it's a massive
Yeah.
problem with the industry. Yeah.
Absolutely. It was interesting. We were in Sweden several years ago, actually, and we were there for a friend's wedding. So we were in our early 30s, I think. So this is a long time ago. But I remember there were loads of men, women. They were all walking down. They'd stop at a tree and they'd pull this band out. And my friend actually went up to talk to one of them and ask what they were doing. And they just looked at us like we were odd. And they just said, we're just exercising. It's just kind of what we do. But it's interesting when you compare different countries. I don't think Britain does aging very well. I
I
really
think you're
don't. And I
right.
hope it really changes. And I hope we start seeing more people. I'm not a gym bunny at all. I don't
Mm,
really like the gym. I do everything at home or outside. But aside from the pool, yeah, I do hope there's a big shift, and I'm trying to encourage. My mom's very active at 83. I mean, I think she just picked up
amazing.
her downhill ski pass yesterday, so
Oh,
she's in Canada.
amazing.
But I do hope that, and I think as a chiropractor too, like we just want people to feel good, but you need to move because that also
Yeah.
stimulates the nervous system and the spine and everything else like
Yeah.
that. So, and it's just yeah. But I guess the younger we start, the more of a habit it becomes as well.
Exactly. And the more we've got to build on, it's so hard.
Yeah,
You're talking about saying to people when in their 30s, start doing it now so that you're building that muscle up
yeah.
mass before menopause. But and people go, oh well, I'll wait until menopause. But if you haven't got the
Mm,
habits and your body doesn't know how to move, it's so much harder than, as you say, with the shit show of menopause going on to then go,
yeah.
oh, now I'm going to go to the gym that I could never get my ass around to doing before. So
I know. Or
yeah,
I've heard, oh,
build
when I
the
retire, I'll have time. I'm like, well, your bone density is going to be gone and your
exactly.
collagen's gone and you won't be
Yeah.
able to touch your toes or get off the loose. So
Yep. Yep.
start now.
Exactly.
Do you mind if I ask what one of your biggest challenges has been in midlife? Because you are how old? You
Um,
said I was allowed to ask you, so
yeah. I am 47, and I think I'd been sort of on and off perimenopausal for a few years, but earlier, I get all my years confused at the end of the year. I think earlier this year was the first time I felt it really, really impacting me. And so I did the Manchester Marathon at the beginning of this year, and I've done a good few marathons before, and I've
Mhm.
done 5 Ironmans, so I've done marathons at the end of those. And this marathon training block by far was the hardest I've ever done, just because I could feel my whole body was just it felt like running through treacle every single time.
So were you sore or was it just energy then? Or
Energy, but just, oh, when it just feels like you just haven't, yeah, no energy to move, to do anything. And then I was waking up at 4 o'clock in the morning every morning because I was having shoulder pain. And I didn't have the anxiety, but pretty much every other symptom of perimenopause I seemed
right.
to have, and it was all just accumulating. I didn't get injured with the running. But it just felt so hard. And then it, because I am a triathlon coach, then it starts to become, well, this is my identity. Oh, and I was having heart
Yeah.
issues as well. And the doctor said not to run for a month while they were doing tests on my heart, which turned out to
Yeah.
be, it's quite common to get heart palpitations in menopause, but they just wanted to check that
Yeah.
that's all it was. So then I'm like, I'm not running. I feel like, and it's my identity and all of these different things. And it was horrible. And because I wasn't running, then I wasn't getting my mental health, and I wasn't taking my own advice to do the
Yeah.
exercise anyway, go for the walks anyway, because it was horrible weather anyway, and I didn't want to be outside. And
Yeah.
yeah, so, and nothing bad happened as such, but it just all kind of came together and felt really awful. So I made a lot of changes at that time. I mean, I started on HRT, which I found made a big difference, particularly in terms of the shoulder pain. But started putting in practice kind of enforced mental health movementy stuff. So when I wasn't able to run because of the waiting for the test on my heart, I was like, well, I could do yoga, and I always could do yoga, but I never did do yoga. So
Mm.
now I go to a weekly yoga class, and it's only once a week, but it's a hell of a lot
Yeah.
better. And it's a mindful yoga class rather than a beasting my body as hard as I can type
Right.
of yoga class that
Yeah.
I would have done in the past. I do a nature well-being session, nature writing for well-being session once a month. So I've built in some things because I know I'm not good enough at prioritizing
Yeah.
myself. Otherwise, I will always make my training happen. I haven't got to the point of prioritizing my recovery and my mental health in quite that same way. I believe in it, but I've learned that I have to make myself do it, sort of thing, till
Yeah.
I've built that habit. So building in all those different things that are helping me to make sure I've got the training and the stress more under control, more in balance, finding ways to help myself to relax so that I can get the sleep that I need
Yeah.
and everything. And I'm meant to be doing Leeds Ironman next July, as in
Yeah.
2025.
I heard they've just released that, haven't they?
Yes.
Yeah.
So I imagine if you ask me in a few months, I'll say that that's the hardest thing. But
Okay.
an
Okay.
Ironman's always the hardest thing. But I
Yeah. Yeah.
think
Yeah.
this
Yeah.
year will be definitely more challenging than it has been in previous years.
Yeah. Interesting. Well, we wish you luck in the Leeds.
Thank you.
I wonder if it's filling up. I bet you it is, actually. I did look at it and I thought I'm not ready yet. Maybe one day.
Yeah, I hope it carries on for many, many years, because we haven't got an Ironman in England at the moment. We
Yeah,
haven't got a
because I
full
think they
distance
got rid of
Ironman.
Bolton, didn't
They
they?
got rid of Bolton, so we've got Wales still, but in England we haven't got
Okay.
one. So yeah.
Okay. And what's next for you? Just continue coaching and as you are, or any other plans?
So I am hopefully, by the time this is broadcast, I will hopefully have
Yeah.
launched my new membership by then. So at the moment,
Oh,
I
fab.
work one-to-one personalized plans for people, and I'm very passionate about making sure that you have a plan that works for you, works with your life, works with what you need to focus on in your training, writing those one-to-one plans. But actually, what so many of my clients get from me, as well as the training plan, is that somebody to ask a question from,
Yeah.
somebody to get the advice, somebody to talk about some of the stuff we talked about today. Why do I have to do the strength and conditioning? Why is it making a difference? Or I believe I understand I should do the strength and conditioning, but I just can't get my mind around it. How can I change my mindset on it? Or what should I be eating? Or all the different questions that we kind of, there's so much stuff out there, but we get bamboozled by all this different information coming at us. So I'm setting up a membership so that people will be able to ask all those different questions. So I'll do kind of webinar or seminars, whatever you call them, masterclasses on key issues, whether it's about menopause, whether it's about how to structure your training, whether it's about nutrition, whatever. But also have times, a few times a month, where people can ask all those questions that they want to ask. So trying to bring that coaching in a more affordable way, so that, and it's just
Yeah.
for women, so that women, whether they're training for their first, couch to 5K, whether they're training for an
Yeah.
Ironman, whatever level, but they've got somebody who they can trust and get that support to ask those questions, and then, so they can get the most out of their training. So that hopefully is coming in January. I can't tell you what it's called yet because I haven't worked out a name. Suggestions on a
That's
postcard, very
exciting.
welcome. But it will all be on my website, feelfitwithlucy.co.uk. So there'll be details
Okay.
on there.
Cool. And we'll put some information if you give it to me in the show notes as well.
Perfect. Thank you.
I think what you said is, even if you're doing a couch to 5K or an Ironman, I try not to, like, if you're just starting, just start.
Yeah.
Like, even if it's just walking for 10 minutes, like I sometimes say to my patients, just how many steps are you doing? Get a cheap pedometer. You're doing 4,000 steps, do 6,000. Let's work up to 10,000. So I try not to
Exactly.
feel like such a fail. I signed up for, it was the in Devon they do the 10K dart swim.
Yeah.
If
Yeah.
you've
Yeah.
heard
Yeah.
of it. So I
Yeah.
signed
Yeah.
up for it last year and I told people I was doing it and I didn't do it. I couldn't get the training in and there were
Yeah.
other priorities in my life. And people were like, how was your swim? Are you still training? And I felt like such a failure because usually when I say I'm going to do something, I do, especially when it comes to exercise. But yeah, I like don't beat yourself up if you sign up for something and like life takes a curveball and you're too
Yeah.
busy. It's okay not to, you know,
And
I
we
mean,
get so, we've sort of signed up for this thing, I've got to do it, but
yeah,
often you get injured in the process, and then that
yeah,
sets everything, holds
yeah,
back everything else you wanted to do. So I think it's the bravest
yeah,
decision to decide not to
yeah.
do something if it's not for you.
And I did think a few weeks before, I thought, because we were going on holiday and I was going to, train open water because we were at the coast and the weather was pretty choppy. So I didn't get, and at the end of the day, it's like, you know what? I didn't foresee that. And getting to a pool is sometimes hard. I think with
Yeah.
swimming, because running and cycling, I can spin in my
You just leave the
garage.
front
I
door.
run
Yeah.
from the front door. I'll run in all weather, but it's the pool that I find there's so many different barriers to getting into a pool.
Yep.
So, just all my advice is, I think you would say the same thing is just, just start small. And if you sign up for something, you don't make it, you still get the benefit from the training. Like
Exactly.
I still swam a heck of a lot more than I did before. I just
Yeah.
wasn't ready to swim 10 kilometers because it's actually quite far.
It's really far. But yeah, all of that swimming is giving you the launch
Yeah,
pad for everything that you want to do this year, next year, whatever.
exactly.
So
Yeah.
yeah,
So I have no regrets aside from I wasted some money, but, other than that, I got in the pool, I got swimming again. So yeah.
brilliant.
So, we will put all your details in the show notes. It's been absolutely fascinating talking to you, and absolutely brilliant for women in triathlon. So, if you're, give her a call. She knows what she's talking about. And also, your passion is palpable. You can see that you love what you do, which is so important when you're working with somebody. So,
Brilliant. Thank you.
anything final to say to encourage these women to get out there?
No, just find something that you're passionate about. It
Mm,
doesn't need to be that enormous thing, but find something that matters to you. I always say, you need to know your why. Why are you training for something? Why are you doing something? Because we sign up for races, but what we need to remember is we're signing up for the training, exactly what you
yeah,
just said.
yeah,
We need to do all the training to get there. So you need to want to do it, and then find what you enjoy doing and break it down. When your mind's telling you can't do something, be willing to challenge that and say, is that true? Is there any evidence for that? If you
yeah,
think there is still evidence, break it down into a smaller thing, exactly what you just said. Break it down into manageable chunks, work towards it, but make sure you're doing it for you rather than because you're trying to prove something to anybody else in the world. Make
yeah,
it meaningful for you.
yeah. Well, thank you so much. I'm sure I'll see you out there one of these days.
Yep, see you down the pool.
Yeah, I will. Thank you so much, Lucy.